leprosy, and I was in Arizona, and I had been brought up in the church, and there was some friction in the church, and the friction turned into a real ugly church split, and it was a split between the young folks and the old folks, because can I just be real with y'all? The older seasoned saints, they really didn't want to get with what was going on, and the younger folks who said, well, you ain't got to get with us. We'll go ahead and get with some folks who will get with us, and with all of our knowledge at 18 and 19 years old, baby, you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. 18 and 19 years old, we left the church. We left the church. And I'm giving you the short version. But if anybody's ever been through a church split, you know it ain't that clean. We left the church. And I was saved, and I had been pretty much raised in that church. I had spent my pre-adolescence and adolescence in that church, and I knew the call of God on my life, and they knew the call of God on my life, and we just couldn't get it together, because what we appeared like was that we had leprosy. We had a disease that would be contagious to the church, and so we left. While we left, we all decided, those of us that left, that we weren't going to go forward immediately, because it looked like what we were missing backwards was real good. It looked real good. We couldn't see the famine in the land, but how many know I thank God for a praying mama, because to stay out in the land for about 4 weeks. 4 weeks. That's all I could really do. It only took 4 weekends, and I was like, this don't really feel right. You know, 3 babies at home, but I was still trying to find out what's in the land that's full of famine. So I'm laying in my bedroom, and it was about that time that Mrs. Coretta Scott King had gone on to be with the Lord, and I had watched the whole service, and Elder Bernice King got up and proceeded to give the eulogy. And if anybody remembers this moment in history, you can get with me. And she said something that I will never forget as long as I live. And she said, it was as if my mother was groaning for the generation that was coming behind me. She said it was as if my mother was groaning for the generation that was coming behind me. And at that point, I recognized that I was a leper, and I was in a leper state, and I couldn't go back to where I was because the famine was in the land, and I couldn't stay where I was because I was spiritually sick and dying every day. And I had to make a decision right then whether I was going to go forward or stay there and die. That's what it came down to. Paula, what are you going to do? So I proceeded to ask God, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And it was shortly after that the late, great Bishop G.E. Patterson came on TV, and he said, well, if you can't go back and you can't stay where you are, then you might as well go forward. I said, okay, God, well, go forward into what? And he proceeded to have me research this Elder Bernice King, and the only thing I knew was old girl had a nice little dress swagger to herself, and I had seen her a couple times on Judge Hatchet, and so I said, well, what is she doing? So I researched what she was doing. Stick with me, I'm going somewhere. I researched what she was doing, and she had gone on and gotten a joint degree in law and divinity from that great institution, Emory University. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I said, okay, God, because at that time, that seemed like the Spirit to me, because at that time, my plan was to go to law school. I was going to go to law school and spend a glorious, rich career stomping out juvenile justice, the injustices right against our young people. And if you ask some of the youth that been to my house, they see my law books and the Black Law Dictionary and Sandra O'Connor and all the folks I wanted to be. And so I said, okay, God, I'll go to seminary for you, and I'll go to law school for me. Mother, I sure did. And how many know it's dangerous to bargain with God, because God will have the final say so. He will. So I applied I said, I'll apply, and if I get in, then I'll go. And so I applied, and I got in, and then I said, if I get the money, I'll go. And so then 2 weeks before my departure date, I got a scholarship letter that I hadn't even applied for. I didn't even know was there. And I said, okay, well, I guess I gotta go. Here we go. Here we go. We're moving to Atlanta, and at that point, let the truth be told, I couldn't stand Atlanta. The last place I wanted to be was Atlanta. But here we go to Atlanta, and thank God for my mother. She kept my 3 babies for the first semester. I said, well, I'll go to Atlanta. I'll start these seminary classes, and while I'm doing them, I'll study for the LSATs and go ahead and get my application in to law school. And sure, I'll get in because I have a 3.9 GPA, and I've already been accepted to one school, and my GREs, they not that good, but my personal writing statement will cover for that. And sure. So I do all this, and I apply, and I go sit through that long LSAT test, and I pay that $50 application fee, all the while saying, God, I'll do this for you, and I'll do law school for me. Well, truth be told, I'm standing here today because Paula didn't get into law school. Paula got a rejection letter from law school. And at that point, it was too late to say, God, I'll do this for you, and I'll do that for me. I had already spent in the first year $25,000 on this seminary degree, so we wasn't going back home, amen? So I said, okay, God. But it was in that moment God began to show me himself on a whole different level. It was in that moment after I couldn't go anywhere but forward that God began to show himself as Jehovah Jireh, Lord my provider. He began to show himself as my mother and father. He began to show himself as the wheel in the middle of the wheel. And I want to encourage somebody, if your only option is to go forward, I promise you, if you take one step, he'll take 2, and he'll meet you all the way.